We started up the trail on Mount Temple, going through the woods, and it was a long way up from the Lake Moraine area to a meadow. I don't remember really how many hours it took, but it took quite a while, and it was a good effort. So that we got up to this meadow, and as I recall, then there were all sorts of beautiful wildflowers growing in that meadow. It was really a pretty sight, and that's where we had a discussion. Bill Oser, at that point, from the walking up to that point, had a really severe blister on his, I forget which foot, but one foot was really blistered up, and he really couldn't go any further, and he wanted everybody to stop. He said we should all stop here. But most of us didn't want to stop. You know, you've come through all the woods and you've sweat and climbed up this much, and you look at the mountain, and it doesn't look, when you're looking at the face of it, it doesn't look that much further up. It looks like, you know, it's something you could do. So most of us wanted to go on. So he was eventually persuaded that we could go on. There were a few boys who decided not to go. Then we started, some of us went up onto this patch of snow that was at the base of the face of the mountain next to the meadow, and stood there for a while. And because we had only, some of us had just baseball shoes on, I can remember my feet were beginning to get very cold. We'd sit there at least 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes while people were still talking at the bottom. Now I guess it was probably Tony Woodfield going over with Oser, you know, the safety precautions and that sort of thing. But at that point, a couple people decided they didn't want to go any further, and they walked back down. Ricky Bayless, who was with me at that point, Ricky and Townie, he wanted to go down too, or at least he initially said, you know, I think I may go down. And he asked Townie and me whether we were going down, and we said no, we wanted to go back, continue on with it. So he decided he'd continue on, so unfortunately he didn't go back down. Then we started up, and we got to one point where I think his name was David Chapin, had a red hat that he was always wearing, and that blew off, and it went over a big rock and down the hill. And that was, I thought, sort of an unhappy event, because here's this guy, he was really attached to this hat. But then we continued further up. Then we began hearing things, at least I remember I did. Some sort of noise, was a loud sort of rolling sound in different parts of the area. And we continued for a while, but then we got to one point where we crossed, there was a part of the trail that had just sort of pebbles, gravel. And again, I'm not sure there really was a formal trail, whether it was just sort of the face of the mountain. But as we crossed, I was, I think, the last one to cross, and a little pebble from there fell beneath us and started a small slide beneath us. Now, Ricky Bayless at that point had already said, I don't want to go any further, I'm stopping here. And I said, well, you know, if my big foot's going to kick over a pebble and start a slide beneath us, I don't go any further either. And then there was a discussion, and others, I think Tony was one probably who said that, well, we can't go on either, because if we go on, we could start an avalanche that's going to fall on everybody below us. So we decided to go back. And that part is where I really don't remember that much further. I remember at one point where we put this rope around us. We were all roped together, I guess about 5-foot intervals. I don't really even remember where I was in the line on that. And I can remember sort of taking one step and another step into this snowfield, and I was watching my feet go down in it, and then I don't remember anything until after the avalanche. And again, I guess at that point, whether I'm really remembering or just picking up suggestion, I'm not really sure, but what I think I remember was coming to and sitting on either a rock or a block of ice at the wherever we fell from the avalanche. And at some point, because it started to either rain or hail, I pulled a jacket up over my head, because that's what I used to do at home when I was cold and I had not enough clothing to wear. I just put my windbreaker or whatever over my head like that. And Then I remember, I think it was Bill Oser, the first person I remember talking to, trying to convince me to move from the rock I was on, or the block of ice, whatever it was, to another position, and being reluctant to do that because my foot was sore, because my right foot was somewhat frostbitten. But then I guess he must have eventually persuaded me to do that. Then after that, really, the next thing I recall was in the hospital itself. I remember somebody asking me what my name was, and then to spell it, and because I wrote my T somewhat like a J, I think they my name is Jerry instead of Terry. But in the hospital in Banff, I guess the first couple of days I was just lying there. I didn't get up for a while. I remember my parents arriving, and I remember asking my father at one point, because the only person I'd seen who would come in while I was lying there was Rick Ballard, and he had a bandage over the front of his head where he had a big gash. Asking my father whether, were Rick and I the only two people hurt in this avalanche, and he said no, there were others hurt far worse than us two. I was injured with several gashes in the head. I think that they told me later that my head was skull was fractured, that is cracked but not broken.